Hey mate, how are you doing?
I'm doing incredibly well. How's life for you?
Good. I got a little bit sick, so my voice is kind of like here. So if you don't understand me, let me know.
No problem.
But
I've
life's
got
good.
I've, I've got
Good.
a good handle on the accent. You're great.
It's the accent, right?
More than anything, it's always the accent, right? It's like we all speak English across the block, but it's in with different accents.
To be fair, I also need to repeat myself when I speak German because even in German I have an accent. So it's like nobody understands what I say, and at some point they just agree because
Because
he
you're
seems
German,
motivated.
he
Yeah,
seems he seems like he knows what he's doing. He's probably a good engineer in some capacity, and we're just going to let him keep building.
exactly.
My friend, look, we've got you on to talk about EU Inc. Let's just give me
Yeah,
the
awesome.
breakdown, right? I deeply want to get out of this is one, why this is so important. Obviously, we
Yeah.
know collectively, but like, why is
Yeah.
this a movement that has to happen for us and
Mhm.
Europe to compete on a global stage?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, cool, cool. So on a very high level, EO Inc. is essentially an in detail proposal how you could make a pan-European legal entity. So think Delaware Inc., but in Europe.
Mhm.
And the main motivation behind this is right now it's very, very uncommon in Europe to invest across borders in early stage. So if you're, for example, a founder in Lithuania, very likely only local angels will even look at your thing. And even neighboring countries like angels there won't invest because I generally don't want to understand different legal systems, tax systems, all this kind of stuff, right? So what a lot of like experienced founders do is they create an holding entity in the UK or the Delaware Inc., right? And then they have like a local entity below and so on and so on. And this is like A, extremely complex, B, countries hate it because essentially it's tax evasion from their point of view,
Mhm.
and a few other things here, right? We looked at the numbers and it's like less than 18% is actually pan-European early stage investing. Or differently put, every country on its own is competing against China, against the US, and soon maybe against India. And from our point of view, the only solution to this kind of a European problem is a European solution, which is creating a new legal entity that's one standard across Europe. So one standard for one Europe. And if you're starting a company in France, you're using EU Inc., and you will be able to get investment from any angel worldwide who has ever done any investment in Europe. So the idea here is that out of this kind of like standard, you create experience, confidence, and out of that you create momentum. Out of that you create acceleration. Basically, you send me an email. I know what's going on. I have to can use the same lawyers. It's a standard document. I've seen it 50 times. I press a button. I have invested. I don't care where you're based. You don't care where I'm based. We're done. And that stuff is completely normal in the States and is completely unheard of in Europe. And our point of view is we need to fix this as soon as possible because otherwise each individual ecosystem competes globally against giants.
Okay, let's break this down. Why
Mhm.
obviously the European Union came together in the early 2000s, late 90s. Why do we think this wasn't part of that? Why this wasn't almost written into the laws at that point? Is it because that startups in Europe weren't being taken seriously? Obviously, a lot
Uh,
of that technology came out of the US.
yeah, I think there's two aspects to this. The way Europe is set up is basically nation states having agreement on
Hmm.
sometimes even bilateral agreements between each other. So basically, it's like each of us on our own, but together we have these agreements. And defining how business is done is very much at the core of the power of a country. Like think taxation, think employment law, think corporate law. There's like 50 million things here that basically is at core the power of a country, right? And so, for example, what we did with EO Inc. is intentionally we do not touch employment and taxation. Like that stays local. Not because we think that wouldn't be great to also standardize this, but just because we believe they will never ever agree
No,
to
because they're
give this
completely
up.
different nation states. It's always going to affect them.
Exactly. And corporate law is we believe is something that you could standardize because it's
Hmm.
roughly the same anyway. So we think that's a good compromise. So number one, because it's actually nation states and not in the state like in the US where it's like one federalized setup. That's issue number one. And issue number two is until recently, the power law and the acceleration wasn't as much as it is now. So in
Hmm.
the last 25 years, the internet has shown that if you have a product that you can sell globally through the internet. You have a perfect distribution channel, and therefore every little advantage you have and every little disadvantage your competitor has compounds. So all of a sudden, all these little problems that weren't really like an issue back in the days, the smaller markets, smaller investor pools, all this kind of stuff, they were always an issue, but they were never like that extremely of an issue. So now you have like perfect power law over the internet, and you have like polarization into very few hubs who can actually leverage this, for example, San Francisco. And I think that is fairly new. And I also think this is the main reason why we did not win in software, cloud, AI, because with this kind of power law that the internet here actually allows, we just couldn't keep up with. And this is also the reason why we need to, as much as possible, unify Europe as like one business block.
When it comes to investing in Europe today, and obviously this power law exists across the internet, if EU Inc. gets incorporated, it becomes a legal entity in its own right.
Yep.
What is this set up for the next 50 to 100 years for Europe? Is it that we can compete on the global stage, not just in software, but in deep tech as well?
This is like the idea. We think that a founder needs the best possible investors as early as possible, as quickly as possible, and not just some random people who happen to be local.
Yep.
You know, and for this you need, and essentially any friction needs to be removed in between. You know, and that's like the goal of EU Inc. It's not about, you know, making huge companies a little bit bigger. It's making about like you start, like the acceleration ramp up that needs to be as fast and as powerful as possible. And that's the whole goal that we are trying to do here, because there's a common saying in European policies, like Europe doesn't have a startup problem, there's a scale-up problem. I genuinely think we have an acceleration problem. It's just too hard to very, very quickly become big here. And that starts with investing, that goes to fragmented consumers markets and so on and so on. There's like multiple barriers, you know, but it's an acceleration problem we have, because if you have enough startups that accelerate insanely, you will have enough scale-ups. This makes any sense?
It does. I want to ask, obviously you've spent a lot of time pulling this all together and deeply understanding the legal system inside of Europe. What are some of the concessions that have been made inside of EU Inc. that typically you would have gone, actually, I would have liked to have that in, but it's never going to happen outside of the employment taxes?
The employment and taxes is the main one. Everything else is fairly vanilla. We intentionally said employment and taxation has to stay local, and we heavily advocate to use this as a moment to leapfrog and create one European registry for these kind of companies, because then you can leapfrog digitalization in multiple countries. Like Germany is like very notorious in this, for example. And you could through this have like one API. With this API you can have like a whole ecosystem, like banks who support this properly, you know, employment companies and so on and so on, you know. Plus you have also like a platform where you can then do a lot of like stuff that founders would nowadays anyway expect. So like full fundraising digitally, like no notary, everything fully online based, you know. Like,
is that still not happen?
In multiple countries it's not happening, no. It's like it's very hard to make any judgment, any statement on Europe in general, because every country is different, you know. And that's, again, that's the reason why we're doing this, you know. So ideally our POV is one centralized registry, like think Stripe Atlas, you know, but with a management dashboard essentially, you know. Standardized investment documents, so the equivalent of like a YC safe, we call it a EUFAST. All of that is, by the way, done, you know. We built all of that, plus like a new legal entity called the EU Inc., you know. And this could also become a platform, like so for example, there is current European law that in theory makes it possible to hire within the European Union across countries. It's just in practice so annoying to do that nobody does it. This is like why the EORs all exist, you know. You could use this as a platform to just cleanly make this easily possible for everybody. And that's like one of the goals we have. You can use this for multiple other things for standardization, like KYC and AML. There's like no common standard how you actually do proper KYC and AML, and therefore like banks have their own standards, legal departments have their own standards, and so on and so on. So you can just like bring this to one standard, so that you can like, you do this once and then afterwards you can like instantly create a bank account and everything, right?
So actually this like EU Inc. is more than just like, oh, we're building a movement, oh, we're building the ability to to accelerate European companies. We're building a platform that, if it goes into effect, actually gives the opportunity for everything to be built on top and sets an inflection point for Europe.
The ideal case is that this is like the outcome. This is the ideal case. Yes. Depending then if we do this, if an open source group does it, or like the countries do it, like the Brussels does it. But in theory, or also like in practice, this is absolutely doable. Like what we approach this whole thing like a startup. We approached like what is like the first principle approach to this. The first principle approach to this is like you need one large standard across Europe to actually have the scale that it's worth to, like, as a lawyer or like an investor, to get used to it. What do you need to do to make it like one standard? You need to have exactly the same corporate law, and that's called the 20-year regime, and do this like through a regulation. And once you have this, like, how do you ideally create like the companies here? You create a new legal, a registry for these kind of companies. And then once you have that, you have a software platform you can use for cap table management, for investments, for employments, and so on and so on. And once you have all of that in place, you can even like fix stuff that's just plain annoying in Europe. For example, stock options. It's extremely hard to do stock options in Europe. And if you set it up like this way, it's very, very, all of a sudden, very simple to like just fix stock options in Europe, and in theory, there is no reason why non-EU countries wouldn't join this whole thing. Like the UK could theoretically join this, Norway could join this, Switzerland could join this, assuming there's political will. But there's like no systematic reason against it.
From your conversations with Brussels, from your conversations with governments within the space and the relevant parties, what's the appetite for something like this at the moment? Is there real appetite from Brussels, or actually it's not as much as we think?
It's super hard to say. So first you have to understand that Brussels is more like an I'm not saying debate club. It's more like a place where every country sends somebody, and then they agree on stuff, but in the end, the national countries, like the member states, have all the power.
Yep.
Okay. So in Brussels, you meet the most hardcore Europeans you will ever see.
Really?
And of course, they deeply believe in the European mission of peace, prosperity, economy, and all this kind of stuff. They believe that Europe should be a massive player in the world, and has all the tools to do that, That being said, in the end, it's an alliance between countries, and the ultimate power is always with the countries. So the question isn't only like, is Brussels for this? It's more like, what does Brussels believe that can get past the member states? So it's also the question of the appetite on a member state level. So this is like the reason why it's super important that, like, for example, Macron and Merz just recently said that they're in favor of this kind of a proposal, So with that, like, Brussels know they kind of be a little bit more like out there, a little bit braver, because in the end, the member states have to agree on this kind of stuff.
How much talking to the relevant parties inside of the European member states do you have to do? Do you have to quite literally explain to them why this is important and educate them on the space, or do they actually understand that if we do this, we leapfrog Europe into the 22nd century if we do this?
So it's like, let's assume we two have exactly the same goal. Okay. If we stack rank differently the priorities of different aspects, we will have a different solution.
Agreed.
Even if we in principle have the same goal. You know what I mean? So a lot of the education, quote unquote, was not about like, is this a good idea? But what is the right stack ranking of priorities? And for example, we said the most important thing is early stage investing. Like, if you make it possible for founders to very quickly incorporate, get investments, hire people, distribute stock options, raise more money, and just accelerate as quickly as possible.
Get the flywheel spinning.
Yes, that's way more important than making it, for example, very easy to shut down your company. So like, you have to like all these different features, like what is like in the solution, you need to stack rank them and make these priorities. So most discussions isn't like, is this a great idea? It's like, what is the specific shape of this great idea? You know what I mean? And that's where a lot of the back and forth discussions happen.
Tell me,
And
what does that ended up looking like? Can you give me some insight? If
a good example is,
if the top is
yeah,
early stage investing, what comes next?
a good example, for example, is pan-European hiring. You know, like by default, it would be great if like pan-European hiring is an absolutely no issue whatsoever, very easy to do. Or standardized taxes. It would be great if it's all standardized. The problem that we see is that member states don't want the biggest, most revenue heavy companies to be taxed through Brussels. They want to like manage this locally, right? Mm-hmm. So the moment you have this, they will only allow this specific solution for niches. They will only allow this specific solution for a few smaller, like, you know, early stage companies until 50, 100 people, until 1 million revenue, which isn't the goal. The goal is to build massive companies, you know? So like discussions around employment, taxation is very common, you know? But even other stuff like procurement standardization, like there's so many different aspects that like, and I agree, all of them would be great to have, but in the end, it's like stack ranking, you know? And that's the problem, you know? Like there's a lot of like good ideas, there's a lot of nice to haves, there's a lot of should haves, but like what's the actual must haves? And from our point of view, it's again, it's like quick incorporation, quick investments, and stock options. If you get this done, you have the beginning of the flywheel. You know?
And then once they see progress, it's likely that they'll change laws down the line.
Potentially, but then you have like the counterbalance to this is that people who in principle are for this, they might see this as a slippery slope, you know, and then all of a sudden they're for what we suggest, but they're against the slippery slope of like more and more power to Brussels. You know what I mean? So you're all of a sudden no longer discussing EU Inc. You're discussing the role of Brussels. And then like, I'm not the right person for that. Like I have no freaking idea. You know what I mean?
So like, we're not playing the politician's game. That's a whole different beast. We're not going to go full David Sachs on this.
Yeah, I'm humbled enough by my job that I don't believe I have strong opinions anymore. You know what I mean?
Or are they strong opinions loosely held?
Exactly. Yeah. So again, like in principle, like also like another thing you have to keep in mind, the people who sit in politics usually have never been working in a VC fund, have never started an early stage startup. Agreed. If you're lucky, they have built companies, you know, or like if you're a little bit lucky, they have worked in companies, you know. But many people there, like their background is legal, their background is policy, their background is politics, you know. So you also have to explain the actual problem. And this is like why we believe it's so important that we do an in-detailed proposal, that we don't just say, hey, Brussels, fix this, and this is important, and then like vibes and memes and whatever, but went in and we like line by line what would be needed, you know. And we did this with Auric, Burdenberg, all the big legal teams in Europe had like 100 plus people contributing in an open source process, you know. So we did all of that because we knew it's like extremely hard to get this right, nuanced, and like the whole stack ranking, how do you properly do this, right? And that's kind of insider baseball know-how, you know. You can't expect somebody from the outside just to know. So like you need to explain all these nuances, obviously.
Okay, so the goal of companies is to raise investment, right? And so that they can keep raising capital and keep the flywheel spinning, keep growing at an early stage. With EU Inc. coming into effect, doesn't that open the taps for foreign investment and then reduces the opportunities for domestic investment? Or is that part of the goal here?
Yeah, why not? Like if it's easier for founders to raise money, I generally don't care where the money comes from. And if local VCs all of a sudden have a pressure to provide a good service, a part of just being there, you know, that's a good thing for the ecosystem, you know.
Rules out the bad actors, puts everything on the table with full transparency.
Yeah, exactly. There's so many rent-seeking people in our ecosystem who provide no value a part of being local, you know. Yeah, let's flush them out. Why not? You know. And also, if we get more money from America invested in Europe, or more money from anywhere, I don't care. Frankly, I don't care. That's a good thing for us. You know. If also like there's a lot of economies where you have insane talent, insane companies, but you just don't have a wealthy enough like base of people interested in investing in startups there. You know. Let's get money in these countries. You know. So like for me, this is a good thing.
I'm a big fan, and I completely agree. It doesn't matter where the capital comes from. Let's just make sure they get capital in their companies.
Yeah, right? Like we have some of the best founders here. Let's make sure they have all the things they need.
I want to go back to the start, right?
Mhm.
Why did we lose Web 2?
This is all my personal POV.
I completely
Okay.
understand.
So back then I knew so like this her stories aspect, like you just had like a lot of the stuff happening earlier. But that's like one big aspect. And then the other one is I knew, for example, to every American big social media hit, I knew like multiple local European competitors. They were usually in smaller markets, boundaries by media, boundaries by language. Like even, for example, like my first startup, I started in Vienna in Austria. I had every newspaper in Austria wrote about it. Nobody out of Austria ever heard about it. You know what I mean? If you start anywhere in the States and you have like a random national TV station picking it up, people
Yeah.
across the whole continent see it. You know what I mean? And usually most startups in the beginning are niche. So you will have like only like 1% of the audience actually be interested. But if the reach is big enough, that's a different discussion all of a sudden. You know what I mean? So media fragmentation, language fragmentation, that's a big aspect by default already, Then investor fragmentation. Like I'm old enough to remember that when the first time I pitched an Austrian VC, there was one Austrian VC and that guy didn't have a fund, you know? You know what I mean? Like, and that's like not that long ago actually, but what I'm trying to say is there's like a lot of fragmentation. And I still remember we were like the crazy ones who went to UK to raise money. In in America, it's completely normal if you start anywhere in the States that you get money from California. So like there's like you have a bigger market, you have like unified media, you have unified language, you have a unified investor pool. All of that creates a completely different level of acceleration. And especially in media, where you also have like Hollywood and like multiple other aspects, that's a very, very strong pull. So to me, that's like those are the factors why the competitor to Tumblr, to Facebook, and all this kind of stuff didn't really succeed. There's obviously also the aspect that you just had a very, very much more polarized, stronger ecosystem in the Bay Area as well. So there's like multiple things, but in the end, all of that to me is systematic. Like all of that can be like there is a common thing that I hear is it's the mindset. To me, mindset is an outcome of a system. If you see that something is less likely to succeed, you're less likely to do it. If you see that something is more likely to succeed, you're more likely to do it.
And I mean, like
all the people around you the same. You know what I mean?
It's exactly the same. It's like, why do I love your YouTube channel? Because you show the most outrageous frontier technologies that people are building, and you make it so it's so simple to understand what it is that they're doing by just talking to the person that's building it, talking to the exact team. And if someone's, has an idea, they can watch the channel and go like, oh, right, so that can't be that difficult. That's all we want. We just want them to try.
Yes.
That's
I appreciate the shout out. So for context, I run like a small YouTube channel, which my wife calls my midlife crisis, which isn't too far off, And the goal here is we want to go into the workshops and the offices of like really cool companies in Europe that have like legit claim to be number one in their field, and just show what they do behind the scenes without the whole podcast intellectualization, panel personas.
No, we just need raw conversations. I think
exactly.
that's part of the systematic problem that we're talking about here. It's like, look, the show is great. Don't get me wrong. This is why I do it, because it just streamlines. For me, it streamlines this ventures. It streamlines the process of getting people on the show talking about the work. And then we can make it all fun and games. What you do is really interesting because you get in the workshop and you go, right, how does this thing get built? What is the technology? Break it down for me.
Appreciate. One of my best moments was when like a dude from a student that works like in a very good student lab wrote me, hey, we have exactly the same kind of robotics as this startup there. And I'm like, yes, that's the point. Like that's what we're trying to show you.
It's like, if they could build it, you could build it. Now go commercialize it.
Exactly. Put a few years in, this could be you. That's the idea.
That's it. That's all the game that we're playing. And I love the fact that Prototype Capital literally like showcases that, and it's the most outrageous things. Talk to me a little bit about the video on, was it Rivian?
Yeah, Rivian, yeah.
Rivian. That was awesome. Talk to me, like, did you end up investing in that, or was it just something you wanted to see?
Yeah. So for context, I try to showcase the number one companies that are potentially number one in their field, you know, and frontier tech is like very frequently like they're still a little bit more unknown, you know, but like if in an industry, like who are the companies that like other VCs are like pointing at, you know, and not necessarily only investments of mine because that's not the goal. And for example, Rivian is a company that does they combine hydrogen extraction and carbon capture to create synthetic gas, which means, in different words, take the carbon out of air, take the H2 out of water, put it together, and you have methane or you have like any synthetic gas. And now you only, quote unquote, need to wait 4 or 5 years to get the energy production low enough, which will happen through solar in the next 5 years. And then you can easily do natural gas anywhere, you know, and you can take a random field in the middle of nowhere that you can't use for anything else, and all of a sudden make money there, you know. And the crazy part here is in that company is the amount of engineering needed to actually pull this off, because it's in the end, it's like 3 startups in one. And number two, the amount of intensity the team has. Like everybody lives very close to the workshop. Everybody is like they're just like locked in. They do stuff all the time. They have a different level of intensity. Like every moment I wasn't talking to the founder, you know, with the interview, the founder ran off to do something, take something, pick something, like screw something every 5 seconds. You know, it was a completely different level of intensity. And that's to me the interesting thing. We have all of these companies in Europe, you know, and we are just like not good at celebrating them. We're not good at showcasing them, you know. So I recently did like a hype video where we just like cut together the most.
We put it on.
Companies.
It's like the start of the stream. It was on for 15 minutes. Like, and if it's okay with you, we're just going to keep it rolling. Like, it's like on every stream. It's got EU ink on it. Do you want me to put prototype on it as well?
Sure, I don't mind.
Yeah,
Like it's
cool.
yeah, I don't even know if there's an EU ink branding by default on it. Like put in whatever is useful for you. The whole idea of this was like only show European companies that build epic shit, you know, because too much we are consuming the
American media,
but like the branding of Europe from the outside of Europe.
branding
You know
of
what I
Europe
mean?
from the outside. Explain that to me.
Yeah, like we are consuming the narrative about Europe from Americans. So, for example, Americans always tell me, "Yes, but you're Europeans. You love the quality of life and like the relaxed life and not working hard." And like, I genuinely don't know what people you meet. You know, like I like
Just being the wrong people, buddy.
yeah, and it's almost like propaganda at this point. And for example, in German, there's an expression like Gründerzeit. Like there was like this whole idea of like just build out massive companies, you know, and German excellence in engineering and so on is something that has been like a little bit like forgotten almost. You know what I
It's
mean?
perfection. Like if we just go all the way back to World War II for World War One for a hot second, the Americans copied the idea of a motorway because they wanted to be able to land their planes on it, and is what Germany did during the war. And like we thought, well, okay, of course, wrong place, wrong time for what happened there, right? Like completely. But the engineering that went into that, insane. Like to think about how can we build a unified road that we can land our planes on and we can move our tanks across instead of just like going across the countryside. I thought that was incredible.
Basically, the idea of all of this is like, what is European identity? What is a European founder? Like a year ago, when I started, like early January last year, started like doing projects in this direction, and you couldn't even define what a European founder is without using negatives. You know?
What is it today for you?
To me, it's people who appreciate engineering excellence and design, who have like an intensity around it, who wanna win by building the best thing. You know, not win by being the loudest in media necessarily, you know, because we don't have that media reach. Maybe not being the win by having the, I don't know, largest funding round, but winning by building the best thing, you know. And that's to me is European excellence, like engineering, design, precision, like all of that, you know. And we have, for example, in robotics, in frontier tech, we have the best suppliers, the best manufacturing networks, and so on and so on. You know, like we are so used of thinking Europe as like little individual countries and like small and feeble. You know, that we forget that we are one of the largest industrial places, I think the second largest. We have a GDP comparable to the States, and we always see the chart with like EU versus US, but like if you look at Europe as a whole, we are completely comparable, you know. With precision manufacturing, like if you want to build a robotics company, likely Europe is a better place for you than the States, you know, outside of like pure funding, you know, because you have all the precision manufacturing supplier network here, you have all the know-how here, you have the best computer vision expertise here, and so on and so on. So to me, a European founder is realizing like this is an opportunity to pick, you know, and this is like money on the street. Like it's your money, like freaking take it. You know what I mean? Like build these companies. And I genuinely see now like a whole generation of very intense young people who want to build these kind of things.
Andreas, this has been absolutely amazing. I'm looking forward to bringing you back on the show consistently if it's
Likewise,
all right with
mate,
you.
anytime.
We'll see you soon. I wake up in the morning and I put on that video now because it's just so damn good.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, dude, I'll see you soon.
Appreciate it, mate.
Keep getting behind, keep raising the flag for this. I'm going to be right behind you.
Appreciate. Anytime, mate.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.